I'm going to read their bios, and I am reading them. Uh, Many of you know Bob, but his plays, he is a playwright and an educator. His plays include Union, which is a new play about Walt Whitman's years living and loving in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War. The regular 2027 Devils Playwright Conference writing. E2, which is an adaptation of Christopher Marlowe's Edward II, which was produced at Rep Stage this past season, Bob. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And The Orbit of Mercury is one. He's got a lot, and one of our favorites clearly was Swimming with Whales, which was produced here at First Stage. And the list actually goes on and on and on and on and on. And Bob is also the 218 recipient, the playwright in resident at the New Voices for Theater. He is a two-time recipient of the Individual Arts Award in Playwriting from the Maryland State Arts Council. Let me see. He is also one of my colleagues, dare I say that, one of my colleagues now at at Bowie State. He actually is responsible for kind of allowing me to be an adjunct there, and he puts up with all my I don't know what to do on Zoom.
We
Um,
love you there. The students love you.
I love them too. So yes, we're so immersed in education and education of the artist. And now Chantal, who is just delightful. She is get this, the associate dean at Yale School of Drama. She's an assistant professor in the school's dramaturgy and dramatic criticism department, which means she is going to teach students how to give First Stage the best raving reviews from now to perpetuity. Uh, she's originally from LA and is a graduate of UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, where she earned her PhD in Theater and Performance Studies. Let me see. She's actually done a lot. Can you all see this and read this? Because it's a lot. But basically, she comes with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of education, with a lot of experience, both of them. So take their word for what they have to say. You are being recorded today, so if you do not want to see your faces on any of our social media pages, you can turn your cameras off. This is different from our community conversations, those of you who have been with us for the past two virtual roundtables. This is where the artists just get to rap with each other and talk about this topic that is near and dear to their hearts as well as ours. But we will open it up to questions or comments from our audience. Please feel free to write anything you want me to convey or you'd like to convey to yourself in the chat, and I will either turn your mic on and let you ask or comment, or I will be the deliverer of your message. And without any further ado, I am going to give a hearty welcome to our two guests, Chantal and Bob. Take it away.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hi, Bob. It's the first time we're meeting as well.
Really nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out and thank Dee for all her work in setting this up. And I also just want to thank Alex Levy, who is my colleague from way back in my UCLA days and LA days. And so just really, I'm thrilled to be part of the First Stage family today.
Have you been at First Stage before?
I have not.
Well, it's pretty special, I think. Um, you know, well, um, I think the leadership, the play selection, the production aesthetic, and and some of these folks will tell you when you drive up to First Stage, it's rather unassuming. Is that fair to say? It's in a strip center, and they just really do amazing, amazing things. Um, and folks, what is it? 10 years now? How is it longer
14.
than 10 years?
Longer than
How long?
10. 14?
14 years. So,
Wow.
um, so Yale School of Drama, that must be very exciting.
Yes, it was an interesting path here. It was never sort of in my sights, and that's one of the things I guess as we think about this topic. One of my recommendations is to be open to the different paths that theater training can give you, because I did not think that I would be an administrator in a university, and it was not a linear path to that, right? So I think I started out as an actor, and one of the questions that Dee recommended was, what was our major, right? So I'm the daughter of immigrants and immigrant parents, and I majored in theater, and that's usually like, what, like, it's like you should be a doctor or a lawyer or something. And so there was a lot of, but my mom was very supportive of the arts. She was super passionate about the arts. And so I had a lot of support, but I majored in theater because it was my heart's desire. I could not think of anything else that I could do. But I majored in theater and in Spanish because I was already fluent. And so I was trying to also be smart about sort of what I would major in. So that was sort of the beginning of my journey. And I'm interested, Bob, for your journey to be a playwright. Did you study playwriting, or how did you come to it?
Eventually, but it took a while. I'm first generation college, so my parents really didn't have much to do or say with me going to college. And I started at a community college, and I wanted to major in English because it was kind of, I was passionate about stories and language and all of those things. And I didn't discover theater in high school. So I was a band kid. So I initially wanted to major in music, and that didn't work out because I really wasn't interested in being a multi-instrumentalist, which is pretty much what a professional needs to be. So I did community college, and then I kind of stopped out, and I didn't go back to school until my late 20s when I finished my undergrad. And then I really never stopped after that. I got a master's in English and then an MFA in playwriting, which is a story for sure. But the you know I when I by the time I went back in my late 20s, I'd been doing community theater for about 5 or 7 years, like religiously, like 10 shows a year. I was just back to back to back to back, primarily as a very bad actor and then as a better director. And so I kind of knew that I kind of hoped that I would be able to work at a higher level one day, theatrically. And my goal was always, and I tell this to students all the time, was always to work with better directors, better designers, better actors in better theaters every time out, and to just keep raising my game and raising my profile. So, but I didn't feel like I needed an undergraduate degree in theater, because I believed that with a study of literature and a degree in language, that I'd be able to work as a director. So then I went ahead and got a master's in English, all while I was directing a lot. And then I started writing. Then I started writing, and primarily in fringe festivals where I was directing my own work. And then I was directing a production of August Wilson's Two Trains Running on my campus. I teach at a historically Black campus, Bowie State University here in Maryland. And I fell off the stage and I crushed my left leg and my left arm. I imagine diving into a mosh pit where there are no people and just cement about 15 feet down. So anyway, I was out on workers' comp then for multiple surgeries, and I decided while I was out to get my MFA in playwriting. So that's sort of my winding route. I did not expect to be in a university environment for this long, but I'm really happy that I am. It's been a wonderful, wonderful career and wonderful life, and I love teaching. That's one thing when we start to talk about day jobs and backup plans. I lucked into the best kind of backup plan and day job for a writer, which is university teaching, because there's the expectation that you're going to be producing, creating your own scholarship and your own creative work. So that's my sort of long way in. And then so many times along the way, I was just plain lucky. I met the right person who helped me so many times. And even times when I didn't even know what I was doing. the first boss that I had, in junior college was like, you're going to be teaching college something or other. You're going to be a professor. So, so that's my long way into all of this.
Yeah, I love how you said that, right there. Some of it is luck, but I think also that community support and seeking out mentorship, because mentorship was really key. And like I mentioned, my parents, right? They didn't, and really, it was more. I was raised really by my mother, single mom for the most part of my childhood, and she did not have the knowledge and skills to really guide me into a career. Like, so I will share, when I was in high school, looking at colleges, I was like, okay, I'm going to audition for Juilliard, and I'm going to audition for NYU and UCLA. And I didn't get into any of those places because I had like high school, like lead in the high school play, but it was not a conservatory program. I didn't have a real sense of training. I had chutzpah, like, which I appreciate about myself, but I did not, and there were not high school counselors who could really give me keen information about my options. And so I went to state school for 2 years, and then later transferred to Santa Clara University, which was a smaller, liberal arts college where they didn't have a master's program, so I could get a little bit more attention. And I had a professor, Aldo Billingsley, an amazing actor director, who I took a class on the August Wilson Century Cycle, and that is when sort of my head exploded, because all of my theater background had been very like Western white canon. And that's really, I came to my own background and scholarship is in US Latino theater. And it came through August Wilson sort of opening my eyes to that. And then I had a professor who told me, you're very analytical. Have you thought about a degree in a PhD in theater, right? And so I had thought I would be an actor. And then as I looked at graduate school, I had to make a decision, and I thought about, I didn't have any teachers who looked like me or who were teaching Latino theater. And so that was where I was like, this was my heart's calling. And so I just sort of, but it was through teachers who led me on certain paths and who supported me. And so one of the things that Dee asked us to think about is sort of like, what would we talk to if your parent is disgruntled about this? I would encourage parents to educate themselves, or to expand their curiosity with their child about why the arts are pulling them so much, because it really is a calling. At least for me, it was a calling. And so, but it's amazing to hear your story, Bob, especially around how an accident then pivoted
Oh yeah,
to your creative writing.
yeah, and it my life was changed when I fell off the stage. So the left side of my body doesn't work so great anymore. I've got I can't straighten my arm. My ankle's probably going to need to be fused at some point, but it really was life changing in some really great ways. I don't know that I would have gone back for a terminal degree
Mhm.
if I hadn't had that accident. Maybe I would have, but I had been working at Bowie State University in an administrative function, and I loved it. I worked in the provost's office. I worked in every office on campus, and I really loved 9 to 5 administrative work. And I didn't think that I was born to teach. I did think I was born to work in the theater. So I was still, working outside as a director and such. And then, I started to slip my way into campus theater, and they were pretty welcoming of me. Um, but so, do you still act? I love to ask that question. Have you been on
I
stage lately?
Well, I feel like I perform a lot. I think a lot of teaching, like I think my acting background has really supported. I do a lot of public speaking. The teaching, the performance elements, but I don't sort of act on stage anymore. But I definitely, I hold court a lot. So that's helpful.
And that's something that I do talk to parents about, because I meet parents when they come in for summer orientation,
Mhm.
or their son or daughter has decided what they're going to major in. And the humanities offer so much to a human being
Mhm.
that is applicable in other fields. And especially, I mean, storytelling, first of all, I tell students we're living in the golden age of television right now, because we are, and there really are jobs out there in the industry. But notwithstanding, these skills that we learn in the theater and in English and
Mhm.
history and all of the humanities, employers want us because we can think and we can be creative. Not that others can't too, But so I do think, and let's face it, and I don't know how you feel about this, but you know, you almost have to have a master's these days, right? In something. I don't know. Um, you know, I mean, whether you're pursuing a career in the arts or not, it feels like the gates that have been set up,
Mm.
we need to have that piece of paper. Now, maybe that's starting to change. I don't know. And maybe you know better as, administrator, but I know if I don't have any children, but I had nephews, and I definitely encourage my nephews to get their masters. Um,
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think. And one of the things we were, thinking about before the panel, right, is sort of the state of the field today. And there's a lot of discussion about, access, and I think an MFA is very helpful. It may not be necessary for every person, but definitely if you're going to go into an MFA, to also educate yourself about funding and how to do it and why you're doing it, right? But I agree with you. I think, especially just for the dedicated time to hone your craft, that kind of a gift of time, because then the hustle of making ends meet when you get out, I think you don't have as much time for the craft. So that's definitely something I think that is crucial to people's artistic development as they look to the profession.
it is, but I mean, as far as an MFA is concerned, I think, I mean, I needed a terminal degree because by that point I had decided I was going to go down the path of academia.
Hmm.
But you don't need to have an MFA in playwriting to write great plays.
Right. Hmm.
Absolutely do not.
Yeah.
Now, do you need to have an MFA, and do you need to have access? And does it help to have particular schools on your resume to get you in the door at, in Hollywood or on a showrunner team, a writing team, or whatever? Maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, if you're a great writer or a great storyteller, maybe you don't need an MFA. And that's certainly what I tell folks who I meet. I got an MFA because I needed it to keep my job. So, and I also had this fantasy, and it was a fantasy that I was going to pay my student debt with royalties. I know, go ahead, laugh now. And that just was not going to happen. So,
Yeah, these are, I think this comes back to sort of like helping parents or family or just yourself to be educated on sort of, am I doing this education path because I think it's the only way to go, or have I met with different kind of folks in the industry? Have I explored different people's paths to see what's possible? And definitely taking into consideration loan debt. Like, I'm paying off my loan debt still. It's a very big thing
and
to think about.
and the world is kind of changing in that regard. We should, I mean, I'll get political for a second. We should not be paying these exorbitant I paid $34,000 a year for my MFA. And that's for 3 years. And, I mean, so things are changing in that regard. I do advise, especially young professionals who are already out there working in the field as theater artists. Um, if you're going to get an MFA, try to get it for free. Go someplace where they're going to give you considerable support and access, because that's really that's a lot of what you're paying for is access. I imagine you hear that a lot because Yale
Yeah.
does provide access.
Yeah, definitely. And Yale has, really strong need-based financial aid program. So there is sort of a process of identifying need. But, you talked about meeting with parents, and I met with parents recently of a student who was pre-med and left medical school,
Mhm.
got into the drama school, and the parents were sort of beside themselves about it, right? And we had a really profound conversation of, if your child gets into this acting program, they've got the chops, you know what I mean? Like, this is right. We have over 1,000 applicants for 16 slots
Right,
every year. And
right.
then I said, but that her medical background was not going to go out the window, in the sense that we talked about like drama therapy and all the different that like you said earlier, right? The connection to humanities, and storytelling, actually, all of these other elements are connected in some way, and how this person could have an impact and how their understanding of the healthcare system actually can inform how they're going to mobilize the art form into, you know, the passions that they still had. But certainly the financial part was a huge part of it, and talking, making sure people understand what it is they're getting into, and to know all the options, right? It doesn't have to just be Yale. You know, of course, I work here and I think it's a great program, but people need to know what the program is best for them. Look at the curriculum, you know, what is it that you want to study, and ask those hard questions, because it is a really big investment.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I talk to students especially about is, you know, what are your post graduation plans? Because you know, as Anne Bogart says in one a book that I use often, A Director Prepares, nobody's going to knock on your door and say, "Hey, Bob Bartlett, I hear you write plays." You know, so what is your plan post graduation? Um, and what happens um, if theater's not enough to pay the bills immediately upon
Mhm.
graduation? Instead of a backup plan, I like thinking about it as sort of a co-plan. So, you know, what is your day job going to be that allows you to still do your art, grow as an artist, pursue that career, so you're not living on the street? Here in the DC area, you know, we're kind of blessed economically, and you know, a lot of my students get government jobs and stuff, and then can still pursue their theater and careers in the arts or teaching positions, obviously. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that. I also, I didn't know, you know, I had an idea of my career trajectory, but I didn't know it. And as I finished graduate school, I got quite disillusioned actually with academia, the experience I had there. And one of my mentors, who is also Alex Levy's mentor, Jose Luis Valenzuela, who was the head of directing at UCLA at the time, you know, he told me, do you want to come work at my theater? So I went from a PhD program into producing, and I was producing theater. I was a program director, literary manager, and I was doing my heart's work, working with the Latino Theater Company, working with the community. We produced this huge national festival. A student from Yale attended, saw my work there. They had an opening at Yale. She recommended me. It was like a total kismet. I would have never known. And I had been applying for teaching jobs for 3 years, not getting them. And I was really disillusioned. And then Yale suddenly called me. And so it was a very, you know, I did not foresee this path, but the relationships that you build can sometimes inadvertently open a door for you. And all the training ground, I didn't get an MFA formally. I got it at the theater with the Latino Theater Company, is where I truly got my MFA doing the hands-on work.
and
Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, go ahead.
That's another thing that we talk extensively to our graduates about is be where the art is happening. Get a job in a theater doing anything. If it's, you know, if it's box office, if it's house management. I know some really great playwrights who are making a living as house managers here in the DC area. So get yourself into a theater, be engulfed in that environment, and then you get to know the artistic director every
Right.
day in a
Mhm.
way that people on the outside don't, because you're on the inside. So yeah, that's super.
That also speaks to the values, like my, you know, Jose Luis, I mentioned him, right? He was my artistic director, and like he was like, if you're not willing to like pick up the trash in your theater, right? Like you need to be really understand all the jobs of your theater. And I would imagine if you're a playwright and working box office or ushering, you're literally engaging with your audience, right? You're and so it's all really a part of it. And I think we resist sort of the elitism of like, oh, only this is artistic work. But if you see theater, right, as a community engagement effort, that work of service and being a part of that whole experience, I think could be really eye-opening, and is really useful in all parts of your career. So like I've ushered, I've done all of that stuff because it's part of the whole ritual of going to the theater.
And having a holistic theater education, theater professional experience, all
Mhm.
of those things. Um, I'm looking at this one question Dee asked us to address is, what would you say to a disgruntled parent who has a child? There are many paths to happiness. And ultimately, I think if this thing is in your blood, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away, and you can fight it and fight it and fight it. And, sure, we're going to sometimes have to take jobs we don't want. Sure, we're going to have to delay gratification and not buy that new car that your friend just bought, and those sorts of things. Sure, we might have to get a second job to pay for acting classes at studio theater. Um, but, if I mean, it's uh, passion versus, and then the other thing, and I think that we've heard that, is that sometimes you can create your own job. You can create your own career. How many people have, well, studio theater here, for example, started with $250 and now it's one of the major regional theaters in the world. So there are ways to start, to create your own job in this field.
Yeah, and I would, in addition to encouraging parents to educate themselves in the field, through the curiosity of their child, but also to ask and understand the why of their child. Like, why is this so crucial? Because if this is your soul's work and you can do nothing else, right? That's like an old saying, like, if you can do anything else, go do that. But think about the cost of denying this, right? I know that there's a fear of what it would be to go in this route, but what is the cost of denying this desire in terms of your life's happiness, right? And it means so much to have the support of a family member, that could also be the determining factor that can help someone actually be successful, right? And not to discount that role.
One of the things that is not on our agenda to talk about is, you know, have we ever talked to a student about maybe not majoring in theater? I know that's certainly happened to me before.
Mm.
And, when you have that heart to heart with someone, and maybe it's in their blood, but there's something, something, I don't know how to put it. Have you ever had that conversation where you've had to talk to somebody about not majoring in theater?
Yeah, I mean, probably when I was teaching undergrad, I was an adjunct, so I was working at the theater and then teach adjuncting at a bunch of universities, right, to pull a salary together. And I taught non-theater majors who were taking a theater class or something, and there were a lot of discussions about where their talents lied. And I think
Yes.
theater can be a part of your life, even if it's not your job, right? And we need a community of people who are committed to the theater. And if you're like pre-law or something and you're on that track, we need folks on our boards, we need folks in support of so I think it's also about, there's an idea that if I'm not, for me, I'll just speak from the eye. When I was young, it was like, if I'm not acting, I'm not going to be living my dream. But actually I see how it's all interconnected, and I think that's the key that I share with folks. If they are really conflicted, it's like, find ways where theater can sustain you even if it's not your job.
Mhm,
That is crucial to the ecosystem of our theater community.
mhm, mhm.
How
Are we
about you? Have you had to sort of just like
I have. Oh yeah,
mhm,
I have. I mean, we are open enrollment university, and we don't have auditions, for majors coming into our
mhm,
program. So sure, you have to have realistic conversations about someone and what their trajectory is, and also, frankly, how you're going to live if you choose this path. I mean, and those are real conversations that you have to have. So, do I believe that a business major has an easier path to success than a theater major? No, I do not. I believe that people who work really hard, um, you know, that good things come to them is kind of what I
yeah.
believe. So yes, I think, does a theater major have to work harder than a business major? I don't think so. I think, unless you're going to one of the top MBA schools in the country, and your future is kind of laid out for you. But I think the rest of us, we're going to be working, whatever we're majoring in, we're going to be, hitting the grind. So,
Yeah, and I was, we have students like theater managers, right, who are also they're doing a double degree. They're doing an MBA and the MFA. There's other ways as well, to like theater, minoring in theater, or there's still ways in which it can support your education and sustain you. And actually, it is very smart to major in other things as well. a lot of our students in dramaturgy specifically don't always come from a traditional theater background, right? A
Yeah,
strong liberal arts college background is actually, I think, the most useful, I would say, before going into an MFA. That's a path I would recommend for folks.
yeah, I don't disagree. And getting a master's in something other than theater, if your undergrad was in theater, is just going to make you more marketable in some area. I have a good friend who just finished. She had her undergrad in theater and just finished her MBA. So and that's going to make her more marketable, right?
Yeah.
She can do more things.
I will say, in terms of college and graduate school, because this leads sort of to the other question that Dee brought up about, given the state of the nation today, the state of the field, also talking about theater education, is like, it can be a very difficult place for actors of color, right? Disabled actors, trans actors, like that. I think it's really important to do your research about the culture of the institution that you're going into. And I will just be very honest that Yale is currently in the midst of working to shift elements of our culture and acknowledging where there has been pain here. And I think across MFA programs, there is sort of a reckoning happening with, how are we supporting and training a diverse cohort of students that we welcome in, and are we prepared to really sort of engage them in ways where they feel their full humanity is respected. And so that's a really key thing I think people need to think about, because it's not, I know that I don't want to paint a picture that, like, theater programs are fantastic and it's wonderful. There are real challenges that we see in the world that replicate models that are replicated in the theater. That is very true.
Yes.
And what do you think, given the current, like, political moment, given the pandemic, right? Do you think theater is still a viable degree to hold now?
I do. But and I'm sure you hear, this year has been so difficult on the art and so difficult on the profession. And I think when you talk to actors who have even been working at a very, very high level, they're disillusioned with the field. They're disillusioned with the support that they get from, their employers, right? Although they're freelancers. And obviously they're disappointed with and disillusioned with the response that we've gotten from our government. That I mean, we hear so much about the airline industry that needs to be built
Mm-hmm.
out, but we don't hear anything about entertainment. And we use that word. That is a big, big, big word, and it's also a massive industry that we export. American culture, we export.
Mm-hmm.
American entertainment, we export. And we're just kind of being left. I mean, and we work in academia, so our jobs are kind of safe right now, but our colleagues are not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough time.
Yeah, it really is a tough time. And I think, but I do think the study of theater is very important, and it's still viable because, this is the time for innovation. And this is the time when sort of really creative, innovative ideas are what is actually going to save the industry. And I think both, like, the two pandemics, right? That sort of the renewed calls for racial justice, and also dealing with the health crisis. Both of those things are sort of causing this moment of, maybe this is a moment where we can truly restructure and address inequities, and that's going to take people thinking really critically and with innovation. And so I do think it's a scary time, but I think it's a vital time for artists to continue to go to work, right? As Toni Morrison says, right, this is the time that artists go to work, right?
And hopefully the theaters are changing, right? It
Mm-hmm.
appears that they are changing in this downtime, that they are confronting themselves and responding.
Yeah, and what we need then is for artists to continue, and audiences and everyone to hold those theaters accountable, right? And how do we continue this conversation, and things like, pay equity? It's like these decades of work, and now I think it's really, people are holding theaters' feet to the fire. But certainly, you name, right, there has been no government support, and that is a different model than, like, Europe, right? And we really need we really need a government that values the arts as culture, right? And think about how much art people have consumed during the pandemic
Gosh,
and
right.
don't actually think about it as art, or everything you see on Netflix artists are creating, and they're out of work now, right?
Yeah, we're miserable, but imagine how much more miserable
Right.
we would be.
Right. And in times of sorrow, you go to the arts, right? In times of happiness, you go to the art. This is our culture, right? And my own background in the arts in terms of Latino theater was around political theater, and that actually changed the lives of people. It's like I see the arts as so crucial. And so, yes, I think it is still very viable degree. But it's going to take a lot of stamina, I think, to see this portion of this time through. Yeah.
Yeah, and I teach at a small state university,
Hmm.
but our enrollment as a campus is the second highest in our history. Our enrollment in our theater program is the highest since I've been there for 20.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the students are coming. And part of it may be, pandemic related, and I should be in
Mm-hmm.
school right now,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's not the jobs that were
Mm-hmm.
before. So I guess we should open this to questions, shouldn't we?
Sure.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi. I want to read something from Kathy Mayer, something she shared about I believe her son's journey. I'm just trying to find it here in the chat. All right. She says when her son was a sophomore at the College of William and Mary, he was trying to decide whether to major in business, IT, or music, which was his first love. Anyone interested in music was invited to meet with the head of the department on how to tell your parents if
Mm,
that was your choice.
mm.
Well, he hemmed and he hawed on the phone and finally blurted it out. And then they said, well, it's about time. He also shared that now he is actually in IT full time,
Mm,
but he had a terrific college experience
right.
and still has a deep and wide love of music. His best friend, however, didn't fare as well. His parents forced him into business, but he's now in his first love, which was photography and videography. And then Kathy shares this, and I think this is something that she's experienced and learned for herself, that parents mean well, but how do you suggest they be more supportive to their kids uh, who want to follow the arts? And she feels that this has been answered to some degree, but if you have some further thoughts on that, if you want to share.
I just to go back to that idea of like, what's the cost of denying that engage, especially at undergrad, right? Because I think one of the stories or one of the anecdotes that she just shared, right, was that then the person her son still went into IT, right? But then, maintain that love and what music brings to their life is so crucial. And so I think undergrad is a time also when people are really discovering themselves. And so what is the cost of love? Like having to turn that off it might cause more harm, right? And so I would just encourage them to listen to the why of their child. And then there's compromise of like, can you minor in something? Can you major in music, but can you do this minor? It's very and I don't have children, so I'm trying to be very mindful because it's not I don't expect it to be easy, but maybe there's levels of compromise, because I think when something feels completely forbidden, that can also send somebody to want to do it more, right?
Right, right, right. Mm.
And I am going to ask as soon as I find her. Eileen Mandel has something she would love to share about how she has navigated this topic with her son. Eileen, now you should be able to unmute yourself. There you are.
Hey. Hi, guys. Well,
Hello.
I mean, I have three sons who went into the arts, and I find it funny, Kathy. I didn't know that about your son. My middle son was afraid of, he's a music lover. He's always been great at music, but he decided he'd go into philosophy because he wasn't sure of himself. And now he's a music lawyer, so he's found that sweet spot where
Hmm.
he'll still be in the music, but not playing all the time, except on his own. But he said to me, just admitted to me a couple weeks ago that he should have listened to us and done music. as an undergraduate.
Mhm.
And that brings me to the thought that undergrad is the time to do the arts.
Experiment. Yeah.
That's when you should follow that dream. And if you find that, as Bob said, you're not exactly the person who should go that way, at least you've done it and at least you understand yourself in that. So I guess, and the other question that I had is I have a son who's a screenwriter. He didn't follow a path. There is no path. You have to have a very sharp machete because you have to cut your own. And his path is write, which he's done. He has no agent. He is in LA. But how does he find something that's tangential to the field that he's in, which is screenwriting, so that he can meet more people, have more contacts, make some money, so that he feels like he's working toward his goal and still have time for his art?
That's rhetorical, right?
Sort of. Although I'd love an answer.
Yeah, that's a rough one, man. Again, if I were younger, and I think I've told you this before, Eileen, I think if I were in my 20s, and if I had the skills that I had now, and that's a big thing because I did not have the skills that I have now. I would have probably gone to LA and just dove into that and failed or didn't fail and at least tried it, because really moving to LA is kind of free. You have to have a place to live and you need a job, but those are there. Those things are there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to the first part of your story, which is also beautiful, and I agree that I think undergrad is a really great time. Also, why I really valued my own liberal arts background, even though right, it's majored in theater, but also in Spanish, and I feel like having a background in the arts as any part of your undergrad education really helps to form somebody's critical mind, right? And that it's so crucial. And then in terms of screenwriting in LA, that's a little bit outside of my realm, but I would say as somebody from LA, right? LA is really large, and I wonder if there's like smaller film companies or like what Bob was recommending as well, sort of working somehow with a company, even if it's not in the writing format, but just to sort of get in the door. Or working events or film screenings or just different ways to meet folks. That's sort of a very ill-formed thought, but to make those connections in the city, and then to share work with other people, for feedback and to build a community of writers can also help navigate that landscape.
And you just made me think of something. This industry is so huge. We know so many people who majored in theater. How many of them are destitute? I mean, really, I don't know anyone you know who's suffering because they majored in theater as an
Right. But they know how to collaborate, right? They can improvise, they can public speak. Usually those are all of the skills. People think they're so niche skill, but they're actually really amazing skills for life. And at the drama school here, we have a lot of like lawyers who then came back into the arts. And there's something about, I think, the collaborative element, that is really draws people in. But it is a skill that I think is super marketable in other fields, definitely, and that's a really good point.
That is so great and so awesome. Two things. Bob, you kept saying, you talked about how, when you have it in your heart, it's going to find you. I call it the Kraken.
Yeah,
The Kraken. If that passion is there, that monster is going to come out.
it's not going anywhere. It's right. You can't just brush it off. It's there.
It is there. And then Chantal, I was thinking about when you were saying how you want to ask the student, why are you picking this field?
Hmm.
And that immediately made me think about the first 6 lessons where the creature comes to I, and he says, well, why do you want to do this? And her response is, I just want to play, play, play. And there's so much more to it than
Hmm.
that. And they were able to unwrap that. It is work, as both of you have shared. But Bob, you said something very interesting that really didn't occur to me. I use the term broke sometimes,
Mm.
but one thing that my uncle has shared with me and said to me whenever I was trying to choose between a job and taking a show, when I thought taking that show would mean my boss would fire me, my uncle would always say, you've been broke before and you've always survived. Where is your heart? And
Mhm.
so that's a very interesting thing because I'm very happy in the arts. I'm very happy at First Stage. I'm very happy around Bob. I'm very happy around Jane and Heidi and the First Stage family. I'm very happy around them, and that for me is the payoff of being a theater artist. I
No,
want oh, I'm sorry, Bob, please.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to open it up to Jane, but I definitely want to
Well,
get your
I
comment.
just very, very quickly, one thing that I really feel so fortunate about, and about the life that I have, I'm not rich, but I feel like I'm never bored. I am not bored, and I think part of that comes from this glorious field that we work in. And I don't think that I think I think the future is bright as well because I'm always going to have this. And I don't know that that's true for everybody.
Yeah. Awesome. Jane, are you ready? You had some questions, you had some comments that I found very intriguing.
I was noting the question about how do you tell a student that perhaps being a performer is not the right place for them. And I have unfortunately had to have that conversation. Um, and I found that the best way to do it was to be very clear. I had a student who said that she wanted to audition for acting programs, except she was going to audition for Juilliard as a vocal performance major. And I said, why do you want to? She said, I just want to prove I can get in. I knew that she would not get in. And I said, but do you want to go there? So you're going to spend the money on the all the fees to just do the audition, put yourself through what could be up to 3 auditions just to prove something. So this is not a good idea. I also knew that she probably would not do well as an acting major, but she was going to go to a state school. I felt she would find it out herself. She did. She's actually a police officer right now. Um, but it was easier to just be straight with her and say, if you don't really want to be a classical singer, because at that time that's all Juilliard,
Oh,
then why put yourself through it?
right.
Um, I also had a comment to Deirdre that I have had students who are ready right now, and I don't know that college is where they should be, that they're young, they're the age where they could get cast as teenagers and they might get work. And that's been a hard conversation to have with them and with their parents. When I was in college, there was a girl in my class who she was a star, and eventually she did drop out, and she went on to be the captain of the starship something something, and she's had a pretty big career on stage and done a lot of TV work. Kate Mulgrew.
I think oh, I was going to say
Mhm.
you need to remember the Starship something
Uh,
something.
yeah,
So,
well, it was Kate Mulgrew,
wow.
and yeah, and I mean,
Wow.
other people that I went to school with who started to have a career. It didn't work out. One actor who became a playwright, um, others who went on into music. I had I had an accident myself that had an effect upon my voice, so I became a voice teacher and an acting teacher. I've gotten to do some performing, but teaching, oh God, I'm so lucky.
Hmm.
So lucky. And I'm so lucky that one of my students is a teacher as well. And she taught me how to use Zoom back in March, and it's been amazing. So, but that hard conversation, I think it's better if you just have it fast.
Yeah, yeah,
Go ahead.
that's really great. I had a professor who I was in an acting program, as I mentioned, and then what they did is I think they amplified the strengths that they saw in me of like, I think you're headed for this path and have you thought about it? And they nurtured what they saw was developing because I had blinders on of like, I'm just going to be an actor. And it was that offering that helped me sort of think about that. But when I was in graduate school, I was having a really hard time. I went from my BA straight into a PhD program. It was too much, and I was going to quit. And I sat my mom down, and I was like, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit graduate school. And again, my mom was an immigrant, and she was like, absolutely not. And I was already in my 20s. She just was like, nope, I'm not allowing this. And she said, you're going to finish the degree and you don't ever have to work in theater again, but they won't ever take that paper from you, and you're going to keep your diploma. And so for me and my cultural background, like, education was the way out. And so it was, I think each situation is challenging, and I really appreciate what you offered of, like, for some people, they may not need to stay, and that's okay. And I think we have to understand that there isn't one straight path for anybody in this field, and that there's always a return, right? That you could always come back to learning. So I really appreciate all these different diversity of perspectives.
Thank you both so much. I wanted to share, Chantal, something in terms of my graduate experience when I went to UConn, and I think I was probably the first Black female that graduated from the MFA program in at least 20 years, from one of the senior administrators there. But there was a point when I was going to quit because I grew up in DC, and I really didn't know that I was Black. I just thought I was a person because I grew up in DC. And then in grad school, I was faced with that, and it was a very hard reality. And I did not. I was going to quit, and I called my uncle, the same uncle. I said, I'm going to quit. I called crying, and he said, okay, you can come home if you want to, but you're not a quitter, and you need to just stay and fight if this is what you're going to do. And it wasn't easy. It still was not easy for me to stay in there and fight. But as Bob mentioned, if you're going to teach, you need a terminal degree in theater. And I knew that that was a way that I wanted to supplement my income as I continued to act on stage. I knew that DC theater, was not a salary making a venue, but that's where I wanted to be. What can I do to make sure I have food on the table? So thank you both for sharing that. And
I just want to say that the teaching is like, now you can be the teacher that you needed to other people. Like, you can be the teacher that you needed. And that's part of my passion of, like, I can be the one to honor the work that they haven't seen before, and that honors their humanity, right? So
that is so beautiful. And I have one more question for the both of you. Oh, wait, we have something in the chat. Let's see. John says, even large theaters such as the Kennedy Center and Broadway and New York are closed, and I suppose suffering. What thoughts have you about the future? That's a great question, John. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm doing a play in my backyard for the next 2 weeks. Yeah, do you have thoughts?
well, I've been watching a lot of digital theater that even just since March has been evolving very rapidly. Here in Connecticut, we are also closed down, but Long Wharf Theater, they're doing, site specific theater, community outdoor theater. I mean, this is really, again, a time for innovation. So I think we're going to see theater outside of buildings, and we're going to really, this might be a golden age of innovation in the theater with radical access for folks that couldn't afford or didn't, or had all sorts of other, barriers. So I'm trying to think of it in that way of what kind of innovations actually are going to radically shift and make it even more accessible.
Yeah, and if we knew the answer to that question, boy, yeah.
I do think we will come back at some point with a vaccine, you know what I mean?
And whether there will be as many companies as there were before, I mean, was the market oversaturated? I don't know. But I thought there would be more outdoor theater by now. I really thought there would be more outdoor theater, but that hasn't happened. And for really good reasons, union, safety, all of those things. And then viability. Can you produce theater on and attract an audience at the level that you need to sustain it as a business model? And I think that hasn't been the case. So the best choice was for theaters just to shut down. So
Wow, thank you both so much. This has been great hearing your insight and getting slices of your joys and your journey as theater artists. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our audience members who joined us today. We will have this on our website and our social media pages so you can go back. And certainly, if you have more questions, you can shoot them to us and we will get them to our great guests, Bob and Chantal. And also,
Bailey,
where's
she
Bailey?
she went off.
Bailey? Where'd
She went
Bailey
off to the
go?
couch.
Bailey said, I am so tired of these people making all this noise in my bedroom. I hope that you all can come back and join us next week for our reimagining theater. So, some of you asked about that question. What's going to happen next with theater, basically with COVID? And I think a lot of industries are faced with that question right now. The entertainment industry, the food industry, so many industries are being affected right now. But we are going to have two artists um, coming with us next week to talk to us about how they reimagine being an artist post COVID. So thank you all very much for joining us. Love to you all. Be safe. Wear your masks. It does help. I'm sorry. And Bob and Chantal, again, thank you so much for joining us. Chantal, the one good or some of the good things that are coming out of this very horrible time, we talked about this, is getting to connect with people that wouldn't be able to
Hmm.
get to us were it not for Zoom. So it's such a pleasure to
You
meet
too.
you, and I can't wait the day to to meet you
Yes.
face to face. Bob, I miss seeing you in person so much. I can't wait for us to get back into the theater.
Soon, soon.
And for all of you, for all of our audience members that I always love talking to pre-show and telling you how beautiful you are, you're still beautiful. We love you. We miss you at First Stage, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.